won't believe what happened when a millionaire CEO went undercover in his own restaurant. It was just past midnight when Ethan, the CEO of one of the city's most prestigious restaurant chains, slipped out of his luxury penthouse in New York, a simple hoodie and jeans. No flashy car, no entourage, just him, walking quietly through the empty streets toward his newest location. He had heard rumors of an employee struggling to keep up with the demanding shifts, and curiosity, or maybe a sense of responsibility, had driven him to witness the reality for himself. The neon sign above the restaurant flickered faintly, casting a soft blue glow on the wet pavement outside. Inside, the usual bustle was long gone. Chairs were stacked on tables, dishes rinsed, and the quiet hum of the refrigerator and air conditioning filled the empty dining area. The smell of stale coffee lingered in the air, mixed with a faint aroma of leftover bread and cleaning supplies. Most employees had left hours ago, exhausted from long shifts. But as Ethan stepped cautiously across the floor, he noticed a soft rustling sound. There, in a corner booth, sat a young woman, curled up beneath a thin, worn coat, fast asleep. Her head rested on her folded arms, and the faint light from the street outside highlighted the tired lines on her face. Ethan froze. He knew her name from the employee schedule he had memorized. Lily. She had been with the restaurant for only a few weeks, yet her commitment was already noticeable. She arrived early, stayed late, and always wore a warm smile for the customers despite the exhaustion in her eyes. But seeing her like this, vulnerable, alone, and completely human, hit him harder than he expected. Ethan approached her quietly, careful not to disturb the fragile calm that surrounded her. He lowered himself onto the bench across from her, observing her breathing, the subtle twitch of her fingers, the small rise and fall of her shoulders as she slept. He imagined the hours she had spent on her feet, taking orders, serving tables, cleaning up spills, and navigating the pressures of an often unforgiving environment. He couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. In his pursuit of success, he had rarely stopped to consider the sacrifices his employees made every day. For a long moment, he simply watched, lost in thought. He noticed the frayed edges of her coat, the slight smudge of flour on her sleeve, the faint marks of fatigue etched into her skin. She was giving everything she had, yet no one seemed to see it. And in that realization, Ethan felt a growing determination to do something, to help in a way that was meaningful and not just fleeting. He thought about how easy it would have been for someone to walk past her without a second glance, to assume she was simply resting for a few minutes. But he couldn't. Something in her vulnerability called to him, a reminder that behind every hardworking employee, there were stories of struggle, perseverance, and quiet resilience. Ethan's mind raced as he considered what she might be going through outside the walls of the restaurant. Bills to pay, family responsibilities, dreams she hoped to pursue but couldn't because of the demands of survival. Minutes passed, yet Ethan remained seated, unwilling to leave her alone in this small, unremarkable corner of the world. He reflected on his own life, the luxury, the accolades, the endless meetings, and realized that none of it mattered if he wasn't aware of the lives intertwined with his business. And in that silent restaurant, with the hum of the lights and the distant sound of traffic outside, a plan began to form. For the first time in a long while, Ethan felt more than curiosity. He felt connection. He wanted to understand her story, to know her struggles, and to find a way to help without imposing or overwhelming. He realized that sometimes the most profound acts of leadership were not about commanding from the top, but about seeing, noticing, and valuing the people who made everything possible. And so he stayed there, silently observing, contemplating, and allowing himself to simply witness her humanity. The fatigue, the determination, the quiet bravery of a young woman sleeping in the corner of his restaurant, giving everything she had without complaint. In that moment, Ethan knew that this encounter would change not only her life, but also the way he viewed success, empathy, and responsibility forever. The next morning, Ethan returned to the restaurant, but this time in his normal executive attire, crisp shirt, tailored pants, and polished shoes. He didn't announce himself as the CEO. Instead, he simply blended in, observing quietly as the restaurant came alive with the familiar sounds of morning prep, clattering dishes, sizzling pans, and the low murmur of staff catching up before the first customers arrived. Lily entered shortly after, her uniform neat but slightly rumpled from a restless night. There was a fatigue in her posture, the subtle slump of shoulders, but she carried herself with determination, greeting her co-workers with a polite smile. Ethan watched from the side, noticing how carefully she moved from table to table, making sure every surface was spotless and every order perfect. Despite her exhaustion, she radiated a quiet energy, a dedication that was impossible to ignore. He waited until a lull in the morning rush, observing the rhythm of her work. She poured coffee with precision, refilled condiments without being asked, and smiled at a few early customers with genuine warmth. Yet there was something deeper, an underlying tension, a hint that she was carrying more than just the physical strain of the job. Ethan could see it in her eyes, the kind of weariness that comes from giving everything without expecting anything in return. Finally, as the restaurant quieted for a brief moment, he approached her. "Excuse me," he said softly, his voice calm but carrying a weight that made her pause. She turned, surprised, hands clutching a tray. Her eyes widened, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. "Can I talk to you for a moment?" Ethan asked. There was no authority in his tone, no demand, just a gentle curiosity that invited her to speak. Hesitating, Lily nodded and followed him to a corner away from the dining area. "Did you fall asleep here last night?" he asked carefully, watching her reaction. Her face flushed with embarrassment. I didn't mean to. I was so tired, and I had nowhere else to rest. It wasn't a big deal," she mumbled, looking down at her hands. Ethan shook his head gently. "It is a big deal. You've been working incredibly hard, and it shows. Not everyone would go above and beyond like you do." His words weren't empty praise. They carried a sincerity that made her glance up, eyes widening slightly. She had never heard someone speak to her like this, especially someone she assumed was just a stranger, or another manager doing their job. I just want to do my best," Lily admitted quietly, her voice almost a whisper. "I need this job, and I don't want to disappoint anyone." There was a vulnerability in her tone that tugged at Ethan's heart. He could see the weight of her responsibilities, not just at work, but outside of it, pressing down on her shoulders. Ethan smiled gently, leaning slightly forward. "I can see that, and your effort hasn't gone unnoticed. But I also want you to understand something important. Working hard doesn't mean you should sacrifice yourself. You deserve support, and you deserve recognition for everything you do." Her eyes searched his, a mixture of curiosity and cautious hope flickering in them. Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Because I want to help," Ethan said simply. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "Not in a way that makes you feel uncomfortable or indebted, but in a way that actually improves your life. I see your potential, and I see your strength. And sometimes people need someone to notice, not just what they do, but who they are." Lily felt an unfamiliar warmth rise in her chest. Here was someone acknowledging her not just as a worker, but as a person, someone who had dreams, struggles, and a life beyond the restaurant floor. The realization was almost overwhelming. For the first time, she allowed herself to relax, to feel seen without fear of judgment. I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You don't need to say anything," Ethan replied, smiling warmly. "Just know that you're not alone. And sometimes the people who notice you most are the ones who can help you in ways you never imagined." In that quiet corner of the restaurant, amidst the clatter of dishes and the hum of conversation from the morning rush, a connection formed. It wasn't based on power, money, or titles. It was based on respect, empathy, and a shared recognition of what it truly meant to give everything you have. As Ethan watched Lily return to her work, he felt a quiet satisfaction. He had planted a seed a seed of understanding, encouragement, and hope. And in the coming days, he knew that their paths would cross again in ways that could transform not just her life, but his perspective on what leadership, kindness, and true recognition really meant. Weeks passed, and Ethan remained quietly involved in Lily's journey, never revealing the full extent of who he was, but offering guidance and encouragement whenever he could. He observed her growth with a careful eye, noting how her confidence gradually strengthened, how her interactions with colleagues became more assertive, and how her smile, once fleeting and tired, began to carry genuine warmth. Lily had started to notice the small gestures of attention, an occasional word of praise, an encouraging suggestion on how to manage difficult customers, or a subtle adjustment in her schedule that made her shifts more manageable. She didn't know who was behind these interventions, but the effects were undeniable. Slowly, her exhaustion eased, replaced by a sense of hope and possibility she hadn't felt in months. One evening, after a particularly long day, Ethan asked her to come to the office. Lily entered nervously, unsure what awaited her. The sleek, modern space was a stark contrast to the modest restaurant floor where she spent her days. Ethan greeted her warmly, motioning for her to sit. "I've been watching you, Lily," he began, his voice calm but carrying an undeniable sincerity. "I see your dedication, your resilience, and the way you inspire the people around you. You have potential, more than you realize." Lily's heart raced. She had never imagined that someone would notice her in such a meaningful way. I just do my best," she said softly, uncertain of where this conversation was heading, and, "Your best is remarkable," Ethan replied, leaning forward slightly. "But I want to offer you something more than acknowledgement. I want to give you a chance to lead, to grow, and to step into a role where your talents are fully recognized." Lily's eyes widened. "Lead? You mean manage?" "Yes," he said with a reassuring smile. "I want you to manage your own team at one of our new locations. You'll have support, guidance, and the authority to make decisions. You've earned this, not just because of hard work, but because of your integrity, dedication, and ability to inspire those around you." Tears filled Lily's eyes as the weight of the moment settled over her. This wasn't just a promotion, it was a lifeline, a validation of all the struggles she had endured, the long nights, the exhaustion, the worry about making ends meet. Here was someone who had seen her, not just her work, but her courage, her potential, and her worth. I don't know what to say," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You don't have to say anything," Ethan replied gently. "Just know that your efforts matter and that your dedication deserves recognition. I believe in you, Lily. That's enough." From that night forward, her life began to transform. She flourished as a manager, discovering new strengths and learning to balance responsibility with confidence. Her colleagues respected her, customers admired her energy, and Lily herself felt a renewed sense of purpose she hadn't known existed. Yet, even as her life changed, she never forgot that quiet corner in the restaurant where she had once fallen asleep from sheer exhaustion. Unnoticed by most, but seen by someone who cared. Ethan's intervention had done more than alter her career. It had reignited her belief in kindness, mentorship, and the power of being noticed when it mattered most. And for Ethan, the experience left a lasting impression as well. He realized that leadership wasn't defined by wealth, authority, or titles. It was about seeing people, understanding their struggles, and lifting them up when they needed it most. The encounter with Lily reminded him that sometimes the greatest impact comes from simple acts of recognition and genuine care. As Lily walked out of the office that evening, smiling with renewed confidence, both of them knew that this was only the beginning, a story of growth, hope, and the profound effect that one person's attention and belief could have on another's life. If you were inspired by Lily's story, hit that like button, comment your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe for more heart-touching stories that show the power of kindness and leadership.